James Hutton was a Scottish man of science. He was born on the 3rd of June of the year 1726. His wealth and social status guaranteed him a position in the healthy society where he was able to excel in various fields. He first began in the field of medicine, but didn't entirely feel like he fit in. Later shifting to experimental farming, yet he didn't stop at that and continued to move from one field to the next. Thus stumbling on many topics was a result of his interaction with members of the Oyster Club. This committee was a combination of different bright minds of the same high social status who gathered to exchange and share insights. At last he settled for geology, the birth of a new science. Although geology was only declared as an official branch in science recently, he believed it was pure science from his first encounter to this. The question that rises here is, why was there a sudden interest in geology? Well, the answer to this question is another question which puzzled the population. Why ancient clamshells and other marine fossils were so often found on mountains? James Hutton's answer to this question was the existence of movement along parts of the Earth's crust that became known as plate tectonics. Followers of Hutton's theory became known as Platonists. He believed that collision of plate tectonics under seas and oceans over years formed mountains that continued to rise until they were above sea level. Hutton's contribution to geology was a series of complex theories that left the audience in utter confusion. Most of them lost interest in the topic or paid no attention. Only very few with the same vision or strong belief in geology appreciated his theories and used them as a base to continue to build upon. These theories that changed people's understanding of the Earth, formation of soil, and plate tectonics, was presented in a book by Hutton called Theory of the Earth. One of James' followers was his friend John Playfair, who was another Scottish scientist and mathematician. After John saw Hutton's potential and how people undermined his work, he felt the urgency to clarify to the masses the theories portrayed in Hutton's book. For instance, with that being said, this small minority became part of what was later known in 1807 as the Geological Society. Members of the Geological Society actively exchanged information, conclusions and theories. This community began with 13 geologists. Little did anyone know at the time, but 23 years later they grew to 745 active members. Some of these members are now mentioned in history as a result of their incredible contribution to geology. Their discoveries have advanced our knowledge about life and the age of our Earth. Some of the geologists included in the Geological Society were the British geologist Roderick Murchison, who introduced the Silurian system in a book he wrote called Organic Remains of a Former World. He also studied a disease that was once known as affliction but now known as Parkinson disease. The Scottish geologist Charles Lyell, who wrote a bestseller called Principles of Geology, through which he clarified Hutton's theory of uniformitarianism. Uniformitarianism is a theory about how the Earth is constantly transforming at a slow pace. Many forces directed Charles Lyell into the direction of geology. One was attending William Buckland's lectures. These lectures taught him much about fossils. Another reason for his contribution to geology would be his friendship with Charles Darwin and the trip to Scotland that they took together. This trip was a highlight of Lyell's life and science because it shows how influential Darwin was. Having so many contributors to the subject, some of which I haven't even mentioned, had its pros and cons. One of the drawbacks was the rise of opposing opinions. One of those controversies was between catastrophism and uniformation over rock classification and different understanding of how rocks were formed. This soon became known as the Great Devonian Controversy. To study eras they must divided them, and so each phase was named as such, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, rather than calling the primary, secondary, tertiary and so on. As some focused on studying the Earth, others attempted to date the Earth and eras it experienced. For example, the Irish Archbishop James Ussher, who studied the Bible and some historical sources. He put the pieces of what he learned together, but his approach was mostly religious, or English scientist Edmund Halley, who measured the amount of salt that was present in all the world's seas and divided it by the rise or fall of the amount of salt present each year, or French mathematician Georges-Louis Leclerc, whose attempt to date the Earth was by estimating the rate of dissipation, which is the loss of energy over time of waves due to friction or turbulence. Moving one to another attempt to date the Earth was Lord Kelvin, an Irish scientist who's widely known for his academic achievements. His suggestions of methods led to the invention of the refrigeration as well as boosting devices. He also contributed to the shipping and navigation. Another legacy he left was in electromagnetism, thermodynamics. Lord Kelvin came up with the theory of light. Despite all these successes, he failed to calculate the correct age of the Earth.